Hi, everyone. On today's podcast, we're going to talk with Anna Bertone about the research updates we've made to our signature article on vitamin K. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Anna Bertone to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast. Anna received her master's in public health at the University of Illinois at Chicago and her bachelor's from East Carolina University. She currently lives in Huntsville, Alabama with her husband and two daughters. Anna joined EBB as our research editor in 2016, and she works diligently on helping me update our research articles and classes that we teach, as well as help draft new articles. Anna also gets to correspond with investigators in the childbirth research field through coordinating our peer review process. I asked Anna to help me update the vitamin K article, which I originally published in 2014, and she started diving into the research in the fall of 2018. Anna's been poring over all the latest studies on vitamin K, and I invited her on the podcast so I could talk with her about what she's found. Welcome, Anna, to the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm so excited to be on the Evidence-Based Birth Podcast.
All right. So, Anna, we've been working on this article behind the scenes, and I just want to give everybody a little bit of background. Vitamin K is probably one of the more controversial articles that Evidence-Based Birth ever published. When it came out in 2014, the response was overwhelming, to say the least. A lot of positive and negative feedback. People were surprised that there was research actually supporting the use of vitamin K supplementation for newborns. And just to give everybody a quick crash course, we do have crash course videos on vitamin K at the website, which we can link to in the show notes. But newborns are born with very limited amounts of vitamin K in their body, and vitamin K is used to help the babies clot appropriately. And we get vitamin K from plants. The majority of our vitamin K comes from plants. So until babies start eating solid food, they have these limited amounts of vitamin K, which puts them at risk for spontaneous bleeding, which is why we supplement with vitamin K in those first months of life. So Anna, can you tell us a little bit about how you started getting into the research on vitamin K?
Sure. So I think it was November of 2018, I was updating the instructor seminar on newborn procedures. And it's a very comprehensive seminar that includes the evidence for vitamin K, as well as erythromycin eye ointment and cord clamping, and basically all of those newborn procedures. So I started pulling some studies there, and then I moved into the advanced courses that Evidence-Based Birth offers, which goes even deeper into the evidence on vitamin K for the higher ed classes. And then from there, I moved into the signature article, and it needed a little bit of updating throughout the content. I wanted to add a few new studies that came out and then do a major revision of Table 2, which covers the different incidence rates between countries on the different regimens of oral vitamin K or the injection.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons I think that this article was so controversial when it came out is because a lot of parents and a lot of people who follow evidence-based birth had been refusing or declining the vitamin K shot. And Anna told me that recently a study was published, first study ever, about declining vitamin K. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So in 2017, the very first large survey came out about parents refusing the vitamin K shot. This is from the US. And the study was conducted through the Better Outcomes Through Research for Newborns Network, or the BORN Network, which is a large network that includes newborn clinicians from 92 newborn nurseries in 34 states. So that's about 330,000 newborns cared for in these nurseries every year. So the authors of this survey found that vitamin K refusal is a widespread problem in the US. 52% of respondents reported an increase in parents refusing the shot for their newborn over the past 5 years. Refusals were highest in the Western states. So 76% of the clinician respondents reported frequent refusals in the Western states. And the most common reason that the clinicians gave for parents refusing the shot were a perception that the shot is not necessary and lack of knowledge about the role of vitamin K in preventing bleeding, and also concerns about preservatives still seem to be a big issue with parents, especially in the Western states. So the authors of the survey, they consider some possible solutions to parental refusals of the vitamin K shot. They discuss state mandates as an option, like what they have in New York. They have a mandate that parents have to get the vitamin K shot. They also discuss the option of offering an oral alternative to parents if they refuse the shot, which I personally prefer over a mandate, giving parents more options. But in many other countries, they do offer an oral alternative to the shot, even if the shot is recommended principally as the preferred intervention. They do offer the alternative. And then some countries offer the oral regimen as the recommended way of delivering vitamin K to the newborn.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the two main options are either accepting an injection of vitamin K at birth. And we do cover the ingredients in that shot in detail in our article. It is possible to ask for a preservative-free shot. So preservatives are used if you have vitamin K in a vial and you're repeatedly drawing out more vitamin K to give to more babies. So you have to have preservatives in it to like keep it safe. Otherwise it could become contaminated. But they have single dose vials and single dose pre-filled syringes, and those don't have to have preservatives in them because you're only using it one time. But talk a little bit about the oral option, because a lot of people who follow evidence-based birth would prefer that over the one-time injection, but we don't really have a good option available in the United States, or at least we don't have an FDA-approved version.
Sure. So the oral regimens are really interesting to look at over the years in the different countries and what they've found with the incidence rates. That's what we cover in table 2 of the article. But in the past, they used to use just a one dose, just giving the baby drops at the time of birth, but not any time after that. And they would give anywhere from 1 to 3 milligrams of oral vitamin K. And that didn't seem to be very effective. There were still anywhere from 1.4 to 6.4 infants out of 100,000 that developed late vitamin K deficiency bleeding. The countries that were using oral vitamin K, they increased the amount and started giving 1 milligram of oral vitamin K at least 3 times during infancy. And that was usually around birth, 1 week, and 4 weeks. So that brought the incidence rate down to about 2.6 infants out of 100,000 developing late vitamin K deficiency bleeding. But with the shot, remember, it's closer to 0. So it's still well above the shot. So then the countries using oral vitamin K, this data is coming from Germany, Switzerland, and Denmark, they increased the amount of oral vitamin K again. And this time they brought it up to 2 milligrams of oral vitamin K at least 3 times during infancy. So at birth with the first feeding was the first dose. And then the second dose was 4 to 6 days. And then the third dose was 4 to 6 weeks. So that's what they used in Germany and Switzerland. And then in Denmark, they used a different oral regimen, which was 2 milligrams of oral vitamin K after birth, and then 1 milligram of oral vitamin K every week for 3 months. So both of those 2 oral regimens were very effective. They both brought the population incidence rate down to under 1 in 100,000. It still looks like the shot might be slightly more effective. The confidence interval around the oral regimen is somewhere between 0 to 0.9 infants out of 100,000, whereas with the shot, it's between 0 to 0.4. So I look at it as both are very effective.
Oh, and so for people who are listening who don't understand what we mean by vitamin K deficiency bleeding, can you explain what that is?
Sure. So all newborns have low levels of vitamin K. It's just natural for them to be born with low levels of vitamin K. But if they get low enough, and it varies from baby to baby, it can't be predicted, then their blood can't clot properly because vitamin K is necessary to activate certain clotting factors. That's actually why it's called vitamin K. It's after the German word for coagulation, spelled with a K. So vitamin K deficiency bleeding occurs when infants' vitamin K levels get so low that they can no longer clot properly. And there's 3 different types of vitamin K deficiency bleeding. There's early, which is the first day, the first 24 hours. And that's usually related to medications that the mother took that cause the baby to have more trouble absorbing vitamin K. And then there's classical vitamin K deficiency bleeding that occurs between days 2 and days 7. And that's more common than late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, but it's not as dangerous as late. And then late happens anytime between 8 days through 6 months of life. And that's the kind that everyone's more focused on because it's the most dangerous kind. More than half of the times that babies get late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, it starts out as bleeding in the brain. So that's something that everyone's very concerned about. That's the reason for the intervention with the vitamin K shot.
Right. And the problem is it's unpredictable in that it's spontaneous. It's not related to the baby bonking their head or anything like that. It just starts bleeding in the brain. And that's the first symptom typically of vitamin K deficiency. With this whole problem, though, is obviously it's very rare to begin with. But people get confused. They say, but it's natural for babies to have low vitamin K levels. So why are we supplementing?
Yeah. So I was kind of curious about what this would look like in the US if you take the incidence rate of 7 babies getting late vitamin K deficiency bleeding out of 100,000.
And that's the rate if you don't do any supplementation at all of vitamin
Exactly.
K?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's if the rate, and that came from countries in Western Europe. So from Western Europe, they had between 4.4 and 7.2 per 100,000. The rates are higher in some Asian countries, and there's probably a few different reasons for that, but some researchers think it's because there's a 6-fold higher incidence of gallbladder problems in Asian populations compared to Western Europe. So, but just assuming that there's a 7 out of 100,000 incidence of late vitamin K deficiency bleeding doing nothing here in the US, and there's 3.8 million babies born every year in the US, there would be about 266 babies with late vitamin K deficiency bleeding every year in the US. So it is rare. I mean, that's 266 out of 3.8 million, but that's still hundreds of babies affected every year.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to remember that there's a lot of things in life are natural. And it used to be that a lot of babies died, not just from late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, but from early and classical vitamin K deficiency bleeding. It was very common, to hear of babies having bleeding after birth that could potentially kill them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's almost like I think people have this cognitive dissonance where they think this is the natural human condition, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't prevent preventable brain bleeds and deaths with a very relatively simple intervention. So I agree with you that oral vitamin K would be a great option if it were available. So remind us again, what are the most evidence-based oral regimens then? What is the dosage and the timing you would give it?
Sure. So the one that is really the only one recommended and used right now is the Swiss and German oral regimen. And that is 2 milligrams of oral vitamin K at birth with the first feed, between 4 to 6 days, and between 4 to 6 weeks. And then there was a very effective one that used to be used in Denmark, but it's no longer used. And that one was 2 milligrams of oral vitamin K after birth, and then 1 milligram of oral vitamin K every week for 3 months. So both of these are very effective, but the one where the oral vitamin K is only given 3 times is, there's probably better compliance with that one. It's not quite as demanding on the caregivers because the one from Denmark, you have to give oral vitamin K every week for 3 months. So the one that's used right now is the one where it's 2 milligrams 3 times during infancy.
Yeah, and there's some safety guidelines on giving it too. Do you want to talk about that?
Right. So if parents are using the oral vitamin K, it's really important to remember that it's a fat soluble vitamin. So the baby's going to absorb it better if it's given with food and not on an empty stomach. It also won't be absorbed as well if the baby's experiencing diarrhea or is on antibiotics. And also, if the baby spits up the oral vitamin K, then it might be necessary to give the dose again within an hour of giving the drops the first time, is what one review recommended.
So if they spit up within an hour, then it's recommended that you repeat the dose.
Yes. And it's also really important to give the infant all 3 doses. When I was looking over the events of late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, there was a guideline from the Netherlands that did a really nice job in a table of sorting them into why the baby got late vitamin K deficiency bleeding. Is it because they took the complete oral regimen, but it just didn't work? Is it because they got the incomplete regimen? Is it because they got the shot and that didn't work? But it looks like there's quite a few cases where the babies weren't given the complete oral regimen and then they ended up getting late vitamin K deficiency bleeding. So definitely all 3 doses are necessary if someone's following the Swiss and German oral regimen.
So tell everyone a little bit about the situation in the US in terms of oral vitamin K.
Sure. So here in the US, we don't have an FDA licensed oral vitamin K for infants. There is an FDA licensed oral vitamin K for adults, and that's a 5 milligram tablet. And then, of course, we have the FDA licensed injection. But there's no product on the market that has been licensed by the FDA that's intended for use in infants other than the shot. I reached out to Clonakyon. Well, actually, first I reached out to Roche Medical in Europe. And the reason I kind of singled them out as a producer of oral vitamin K is because they produce Clonakyon, which is mentioned in all of these papers from the countries that are giving us good surveillance data. Like Clonakyon is mentioned in Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, the Netherlands. It seems to be a product where the formulation is really well tested and quite common in many of these countries. So I reached out to Roche Medical and they replied to me that the Clonakyon has been divested to a different company, and they gave me the contact information for Kepler Farm, which now I guess owns the rights to Clonakyon. And I heard back from the head of the regional sales for Western Europe and North America. He said that unfortunately there's no concrete plans to register Clonakyon for use in the US, but that they would evaluate the possibility. And I was excited to hear that because I really hope they do evaluate the possibility. And I wrote him back to let him know that I think parents here, families here would really like the option of having oral vitamin K. And when we do have cases of late vitamin K deficiency bleeding in this country, oftentimes it's among parents that have refused the shot. So if they may not have refused an oral vitamin K option, so I think that could possibly get down any rates of late vitamin K deficiency bleeding that we have here in the US.
And some people do here use some non-FDA licensed oral vitamin K drops. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So some people are using an oral vitamin K supplement here instead of a shot. The survey that I mentioned earlier about parents refusing the vitamin K shot, they found that clinicians at about 1/3 of those nursery sites offered parents an oral vitamin K alternative. They didn't say what that was, but I was very curious what that might have been. When I was looking around for an oral vitamin K supplement that's available here in the US, I found one called BioK Emulsion, registered trademark. And that one is 500 micrograms of vitamin K1 per drop. So 4 drops would be 2 milligrams. And then the other ingredients in that product are water, gum arabic, and sesame seed oil. But this is sold as a supplement without FDA approval. So it's not required to have the stated amount of vitamin K. The amount could vary from vial to vial, since it's not regulated or certified by a third party. But some parents are using that, and perhaps some clinicians are recommending that as well as an option.
Yeah, and I've seen some of them for sale on different like home birth supply, midwifery supply websites, and I've seen them in different food stores as well. So I think they're widely available and a potential option. Of course, just the main drawback is that they're not regulated by a third party, so the dose isn't guaranteed. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, we talk about options, alternatives. Some people email us and ask, well, what about supplementing the mother? Because we haven't really talked about this that much, but the levels of vitamin K are limited in breast milk as well. There's not a very efficient transfer of vitamin K from the breastfeeding parent to the baby through breast milk. So can you talk a little bit about the new research on supplementing the breastfeeding parent?
Sure. So there's actually research on supplementing the pregnant parent first. There was a meta-analysis that came out in 2018 where they looked at clinical trials of mothers that were given supplemental vitamin K while pregnant compared to mothers that did not receive any supplemental vitamin K. And they were looking at the outcome of vitamin K deficiency bleeding to see if the moms that took vitamin K while pregnant were less likely to have an infant experience vitamin K deficiency bleeding. So the only two trials that contributed data to that outcome were from 1951 and 1961, because since 1961, babies have been given supplemental vitamin K. It hasn't been considered ethical to not give them any vitamin K at birth. But in both of these trials, there were babies that experienced vitamin K deficiency bleeding. They did not see a difference between babies born to mothers who had been given vitamin K supplement during pregnancy versus the mothers who had not been given any vitamin K. The mothers in this study that took vitamin K took different dosages and durations. In one of the studies, they took vitamin K from 4 to 12 hours before birth. And in another, they took vitamin K at the start of labor. So with both of these studies contributing to the vitamin K deficiency bleeding outcome, the mothers were given vitamin K right before the birth, and they did not see a difference in the baby's levels of vitamin K deficiency bleeding. So this study basically concludes that there's really not enough evidence to show how safe it is for pregnant people to take high amounts of vitamin K during pregnancy. I was curious about what the recommended daily intake is for vitamin K. So I looked up what the NIH had for that, and they have that it's 90 micrograms of vitamin K is what's recommended every day. And that's for females 19 plus, including if they're pregnant or lactating. But it's actually pretty easy to exceed 90 micrograms of vitamin K every day, because the NIH website listed foods that are the highest in vitamin K. The food that's the highest in vitamin K is collard greens, according to their website. And collard greens, in just half a cup of frozen collard greens that have been boiled, a half a cup of that is 530 micrograms per serving. So it's pretty easy to exceed the recommended daily intake of vitamin K. But if you look at some of these studies on supplementing the mother, they were giving them much higher amounts than that. There was one study where they gave them 50 milligram injection.
Wow.
4 and 12 hours before birth. So these studies are from a long time ago, from the 50s and 60s. Well, I didn't find any evidence of there being much safety data out there on taking high amounts of vitamin K during pregnancy.
Yeah. And the problem is that the vitamin K it's not stored in your blood. So it's not really transferred that well from the mother to the infant through the placenta, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. When they look at mothers that had normal levels of vitamin K, they still weren't able to detect vitamin K levels in the cord blood. So levels going to the infant can still be undetectable, even when the mother has what's considered a normal, healthy intake of vitamin K. So it's not transferring very well to the baby.
What about with breast milk through supplementing the lactating person?
So supplementing the lactating person, there's actually more promising evidence around that. There's some interesting studies there. I found a new reference from the Drugs and Lactation database from 2018. And they said that levels of vitamin K in breast milk and colostrum are similar. They're about 1 to 9 micrograms per liter. But levels in breast milk are about 1 microgram higher in the hind milk instead of the foremilk, which makes sense because vitamin K is fat soluble.
And I have to highlight, that's a change we made to the article, because it used to be thought that there were higher levels in colostrum, but now the research is showing that there's higher levels of vitamin K in the hind milk, the milk that the baby gets at the end of the feeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's about 1 to 9 micrograms per liter in breast milk. And then if you think about formula, there's about 55 micrograms per liter in infant formula. So babies that are formula fed are getting much higher levels of vitamin K, which is why late vitamin K deficiency bleeding events tend to occur they almost always occur among breastfed babies. I did see some where they occurred among formula-fed babies, and that's usually related to underlying liver diseases or gallbladder disorders. But exclusive breastfeeding is a main risk factor for vitamin K deficiency bleeding, just because levels of vitamin K are naturally very low in breast milk. But there are studies on supplementing the mother to increase the levels of vitamin K in the breast milk. And they show that taking a daily supplement while breastfeeding does increase vitamin K levels in breast milk. However, there's not enough evidence at this time to recommend vitamin K supplements for the mother as a replacement for newborn supplements. But I wanted to highlight one study I thought was interesting from the Netherlands, and just to kind of demonstrate the effect that these studies are finding. And in this study, 31 newborns were treated according to Dutch guidelines from 2002, which in 2002 was they were given 1 milligram of vitamin K orally at birth, and then 25 micrograms every day from day 8 until they were no longer exclusively breastfeeding. So the babies were treated according to the normal regimen. And then their mothers were given either 0, 0.8, 2, or 4 milligrams of oral vitamin K once a day, all the way from postpartum day 4 to postpartum day 16. Before any of the mothers took any supplements, their average milk levels were between 6 and 7 micrograms per liter. So then on day 16, they looked at the levels of vitamin K in these mothers' breast milk, and they found the mother that was given 0.8 milligrams had 24.5 micrograms per liter. The one that was given 2 milligrams had 60.6 micrograms per liter. And the one that was given 4 milligrams had 139.6 micrograms per liter. So from this study, you can see that the mothers that were given 2 milligrams and the mothers that were given 4 milligrams had levels of vitamin K in their breast milk that was either the same as what we see in infant formulas or exceeded what we see in infant formulas, which is, again, about 50 to 60 micrograms per liter. So I thought that study was really interesting, that somewhere between 2 and 4 milligrams of oral vitamin K brings levels of vitamin K up in breast milk to about the same as infant formula.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, Anna, what's your takeaway from looking at all of the newest research and looking at all the different countries and their regimens and the effects that they're finding? What would you say, is the bottom line from the updated findings of our article?
Okay. Well, I think the bottom line is that the same main risk factors still apply from when you wrote the article originally in 2014. Exclusive breastfeeding is a main risk factor, and not getting enough vitamin K after birth is a main risk factor. But as far as the updates, I think the big takeaway is that there is an effective oral regimen for parents that are going that route. There's really good incidence rates on this coming out of Germany and Switzerland. And then, of course, we saw that the regimen from Denmark was also very effective. So I think that's a takeaway, is that there are effective oral regimens. When I was looking through some of the tables on events of late vitamin K deficiency bleeding, I saw some occurring among infants that had received the shot. So that's something that I think is misreported in some papers. The shot is not 100% effective. Nothing is 100% effective. The shot, the most effective oral regimen, there's still, unfortunately, babies are still having late vitamin K deficiency bleeding. And that comes down to underlying liver disease and problems with the gallbladder. But I think parents need to know that late vitamin K deficiency bleeding is preventable with the shot. It's preventable with one of these effective oral regimens. If there's a parent that is refusing the shot for their baby, there are other risk reduction strategies that they can take. I think that if someone's going to refuse the shot, they need to really consider possibly supplementing with oral vitamin K, or if not doing that, then supplementing themselves as a lactating mother. But there's not very strong evidence for these things, but it looks to me from reviewing the evidence that it's better than doing nothing. You definitely don't want to do nothing, because late vitamin K deficiency bleeding is serious. It can have serious consequences.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing these research updates with us. And I just want to remind everyone that you can find our signature article all about the evidence on vitamin K at evidencebasedbirth.com/vitamin K. You can also Google newborn vitamin K shot, and we're usually one of the top results there. As part of her work on this article, Anna also helped me update the one-page handout on this topic. So we have a updated one-page handout that you can download right from that webpage where we have the vitamin K article. There's a blue button towards the top. Just click on that to download. We'll also be sending out the link to the updated one-pager to everybody who subscribes to our newsletter. And then also for those of you who are listening who are our professional members, our instructors, or taking taking the childbirth class, in your PDF library, you have the updated full-length printer-friendly PDF, and you also have the one-pager in your PDF library. So thank you so much to Anna for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. And if there's a question that you guys have about vitamin K, chances are it's probably covered in the article. So I'd encourage if you still have further questions to read through that full-length article in depth at evidencebasedbirth.com/vitamin K. Thanks everyone for listening. I'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.